expanses of glass. And this is the office building because the Vegas Shoe Last Factory is actually a campus. But there are giant steel 16 light or pane, whatever you want to say. Well, light and pane are different. A light is actually the individual piece of glass within a window pane. So when we see a window, there's each of the pieces of glass that are divided, by either wood or metal. That's called a light. Whereas a pane is sort of several lights put together. So these would be the windows in the Shoe Last Factory are 16 light windows, and then the center 4 panes of glass are operable. You'd have to look at a picture. I'm sorry if I didn't describe that very well. So the building is very, very linear. There's no unnecessary detail, and the structure almost looks more like a boat than a building, even with it has a smokestack. So it definitely looks like some sort of very cool Art Deco cruise ship. Gropius felt that the exterior design should reveal the construction logic of a building, and it would become his mandate to discover artistic solutions of constructing industrial buildings in a variety of contexts. Gropius formally expressed his design ideals during a lecture at the Folkwang Museum in April of 1911. In his lecture, Monumental Art and Industrial Construction, he explained that train stations, department stores, and factories should no longer be built like those from previous decades and needed to evolve to suit changing societal and cultural dynamics. Gropius emphasized the social aspect to architectural design, suggesting that improving working conditions through increased daylight, fresh air, and hygiene would lead to a greater satisfaction of workers and therefore increase overall production. These are the theories that would guide his design of the Vegas factory. Amazingly, he was able to discuss design, architectural theory, and identify a direction he wanted contemporary style to move, all without attaining a college degree. I think, and I mentioned the men that he was in the Peter Barron studio with, Mies van der Rohe and Le Corbusier, who, shared in his sort of modern aesthetic and theory and architectural ideals. But, when you think of, this is pretty early to say that because Frank Lloyd Wright over here is doing Oak Park. I think he did the studio in sort of late 1800s. But he, is also recognizing kind of this modernist aesthetic, but in a different way. Because, organic architecture and Wrightian principles were more connected to the earth. And there was a big awareness of context. Whereas I think that Gropius and the Bauhaus, it seems more detached, and it's very honest construction, honest design. You don't put things on your building. So they're sort of saying the same thing, but expressing it in a different way. Because Frank Lloyd Wright believed that as well. But obviously his architecture is different than the streamlinedness of the Bauhaus. So Gropius, he left the studio, and like I said, the Shoe Last Factory was built in 1913, and it's a whole complex. And so the office building is what I was describing, but the complex also had manufacturing buildings, storage, as well as offices. And Gropius felt that it was important to design an exterior aesthetic that could be applied to various structures. So it's not sort of individual. You have kind of repeated details and repeated materials and repeated ideas. So the use of brick is seen repeatedly throughout the complex. He doesn't really identify each of the buildings with its own personality. He sort of uses the same architectural tricks for all of them. And the office building, this 3-story office building that's very transparent. This is the one with the large expanses of glass. So instead of using a conventional load-bearing exterior wall, Gropius placed reinforced concrete columns. So this is all the structure inside the building. So you free up the facade and you're able to punch more holes or make large expanses of windows because your load doesn't have to go down the wall into the ground. It's through the columns on the inside, which is also a trick or a structural application that Corbusier applied with his pilotis. So the building is sort of able to look like it hovers more. You're able to have a very transparent facade. So a series of brick piers suspend iron frames between that supports glass inserts. Metal panels were placed within the iron frame to conceal the floor slabs behind. The most innovative feature of the building is the fully glazed exterior corners, which are free of structural elements. So having like a window that wraps a corner is something that people hadn't really seen.
Right.
The exterior design of the office building effectively demonstrated Gropius's ambition to improve interior conditions, so like light and air, while exposing contemporary construction techniques as an architectural image. And the factory was a first in a string of works that resulted from a collaboration with industrialists dealing more artistically with straightforward industrial briefs. So it's a factory building, but it's beautiful. So it's interesting because we talked about the Lemp Brewery last time, and it's very beautiful, but it's very heavy.
Right, yeah.
And it's punch openings, and it's obviously, 1850s. It's much earlier. It's still, I think, to be noted that something that doesn't have to be beautiful, a factory could just be a metal building or a brick building. And it is beautiful. So there's just a lot of thought put into it. So it was built in 1913, but already in 1936, so about 2 decades later, architectural historian Sir Nicholas Pevsner was lauding the Fagus factory's, quote, unprecedented sense of openness and continuity between inside and outside. So we're hearing a lot of parallels between Frank Lloyd Wright with the sort of inside-outside relationship as well. The model factory and office designed for the first Werkbund exhibition in 1914 was also a sign of things to come, merging modernism with more traditional ideas of monumentality. So most significantly, Gropius established the Bauhaus in 1919. So the ideas were as follows. A flyer declared, quote, art and the people must form an entity. Art shall no longer be a luxury of the few, but should be enjoyed and experienced by the broad masses. The aim is an alliance of the arts under the wing of great architecture, end quote. The Bauhaus Manifesto would be drafted the same year. So we're in the 100th anniversary of Bauhaus this year.
Yay!
When Gropius was able to negotiate the merging of the Academy of Fine Arts with the disbanded School of Arts and Crafts, creating the, I want to say stalactites, but that's just the beer.
So those were canes.
Staatlichs. It's Staatliches. Staatlichs. Bauhaus in Weimar.
I'm already practicing. Weimar.
Yeah. In the manifesto, Gropius set out the objectives and principles of the school, stating that the Bauhaus strives to reunite arts and crafts, sculpture, painting, applied art, and handicrafts as the permanent elements of a new architecture. This was the result of a reorientation for the school, which pushed standardization and international goals and modern architecture to the fore in the International Architecture Exhibition, staged by Gropius. The shift, so reorientation, the shift saw criticisms of the school of Bauhaus rise, much of it ironically from trade and craft organizations, and the school's funding was drastically cut as right-wing members of the state assembly gained greater influence. In 1925, Gropius himself was asked to resign, and in a bid to save the school, negotiations began with alternative locations. Dessau in Saxony-Anhalt made the best offer and paved the way for the construction of Gropius's most famous works, the Bauhaus itself and the houses for its masters in 1926, built as symbols of a new architecture. Gropius left the Bauhaus in 1928 in the hands of Hannes Meyer and subsequently Mies van der Rohe to continue his own practice in Berlin. The school would close in 1932 following increasing political pressure from the far right. So yeah, stuff starts hitting the fan in the 30s. Gropius was initially indifferent about the seizure of power by the Nazis. There was a hope that the functional aesthetic of the Bauhaus could be a means for this new regime to express itself. And in 1933, Gropius entered a competition for a new Reichsbank. But it soon became clear that there was little interest in modernism as the aesthetic language for this fascist regime. With the help of Maxwell Fry, Gropius, under the pretext of a short trip to Italy, fled to England in 1934. He was only there for a few years before he moved to the U.S. in 1937, and he was appointed as a professor at Harvard. Then a year later, he became director of the Department of Architecture. I don't have much else to say about Gropius in the U.S. except for one of my most favorite and beautiful places, Asheville. Gropius was involved with the development of Black Mountain College after the founder contacted Philip Johnson in New York, who directed him to talk to either Harvard or just Gropius, and he created an overall campus. He and Marcel Breuer designed a campus for the Black Mountain Arts College in January of 1939. The college was located at Lake Eden outside of Asheville, but they did not have enough money to construct the plan that Breuer and Gropius had created. So Walter Gropius was involved from the beginning until, I guess, after the war. And his daughter attended the college from 43 until 46.
Oh, really?
She did. Beatty Ati Gropius Johansson.
So, a child with his second wife.
Sure.
Okay.
And it says, so this is also pretty interesting. At Harvard, Gropius encountered an entrenched Beaux-Arts tradition, and the transition to a modern curriculum was a slow process. He invited Joseph Albers, another modernist, to teach seminars and for a full semester, but he was never able to obtain a tenured professorship for him. On the other hand, Albers, when he observed the struggles Gropius had encountered in infecting change at Harvard, was not eager to leave Black Mountain because Joseph Albers was a professor at the Black Mountain Arts College. So he didn't want to leave there because he saw that Harvard was sort of slow on the modernist uptake. So Gropius encouraged his Harvard students to study at Black Mountain to build some practical experience.
Good.
Don't have any more German that I want to try to
slaughter?
Pronounce. So we need to find some French stuff.
French is your jam and
Italian's
German is
okay.
Mine.
I can do Italian.
I think German comes to me easily because I had 6 years of it growing up and through elementary school.
I did not know that.
Yeah. That was the same time that BMW built their plant near my hometown. And so they all started putting us through German classes.
Got it.
In school. I'm going to do a really quick wrap up. So in 1918, when Walter was away in the war, Alma was already carrying on with husband number 3, or soon to be husband number 3.
So did she overlap, like every time? Was she with the previous husband when she met?
Seems to be, yeah. That seems to be her
she
MO.
She was with Mahler when she met Gropius, and then she was with Gropius when she met
Werfel. And in 1919, she actually had a pregnancy and gave birth to a little boy named Martin, whose paternity was claimed by Franz Werfel.
Is it Werfel?
It's Werfel.
Well, they need to spell it right then.
W is always a V.
I don't care. Well, V is also V. So what is W? Just don't use it.
Because Vienna is Wien.
Yeah.
W-I-E-N.
Oh, right. We knew that. I knew that flying through the airport. I was like, what's Wien? Wien is Vienna.
Apparently, Alma had met Werfel as early as November of 1917, and in another one of her stunning descriptions, described him as a, quote, fat, bow-legged Jew with bulging lips.
What?
Yep. But they still ended up entertaining a passionate liaison. Maybe these guys were really good in bed. Is that the key?
I guess so.
Yeah. That's the only thing I could think of. He, of course, began to idolize her. And in this case, he was 11 years younger than her. So he was very young.
And now for something not so scandalous.
Stay tuned.